Welcome. You're here because you want to get straight to the heart of complex topics fast. Today, we're diving into a real astronomical puzzle. The third interstellar object confirmed in our system, it's called 3I ATLAS. It arrived around July 2025. And you probably remember the first two. Oumuamua, that was the really strange, tumbling one nobody could quite classify. And then 2I, Borisov, which, well, that looked and acted pretty much like a standard comet.
Exactly. Textbook comet, that one.
But 3I, ATLAS, it's landed somewhere in the middle. It acts like a comet, sure, but its chemical makeup, its structure, they're distinctive.
Right.
Very distinctive. So our mission today, first, we'll unpack the verified data, the stuff we know that's unusual. And second, we're going to explore a pretty fascinating theory, one based entirely on physics, that maybe, just maybe, this is something more, a kind of cloaked arrival. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, and let's be really clear up front for you listening. This part is a structured thought experiment. We're taking the actual observation, the light spectra, the movement, what it's made of, and layering on what you might call cinematic speculation. The goal here, the intellectual exercise, is to separate what known physics actually allows from what unproven intent might look like if it existed. It's a fine line.
Okay, good distinction. So let's start with the solid ground, the facts. This thing was active, really active, surprisingly early on. We know from archival data that 3I ATLAS started outgassing, releasing gas and dust way out past Jupiter's orbit, over 6 AU. That was between May and July 2025. It basically woke up miles from the sun.
It really did. And that early activity, that was a big flag, a clue. The Swiss satellite picked up hydroxyl OH, which is, a common sign of water breaking down.
Right.
But it was the James Webb Space Telescope, the JWST, looking at its spectrum in August 2025 that really made astronomers sit up and take notice, start rethinking things.
Right, that's where the chemistry got. Well, weird. JWST found prominent carbon dioxide, KO, along with water, HRO, and carbon monoxide, CO. Now, seeing clears isn't that unusual in itself.
Not on its own.
But the ratio, the amount of KO compared to water, that was the kicker, wasn't it? It was ranked among the highest ratios ever seen in any comet.
That's precisely it. What's fascinating here is what that ratio implies astronomically. It's not just a lot of KO. It fundamentally points to where this object must have formed. To keep that much KO Euros ice-frozen, 3I, ATLAS needed to come from somewhere incredibly cold. Much colder and likely much farther out in its home star system than where our own Oort cloud comets formed. It's like a messenger from the absolute deep freeze.
And then, as it swung closer to the sun, perihelion was October 29th, about 1.35 AU out. It passed near Mars, got brighter, sometimes looked a bit greener.
Yeah, that green tint often comes from diatomic carbon, C Euros, getting fluoresced by sunlight. Pretty common in comets, but noted.
Spectroscopy also picked up weak carbon chains, but strong CN, that's cyanogen.
Right. And visually, structure was odd, too. An asymmetric coma, the gas cloud around it, and this persistent sunward feature.
Which could be what? A jet? Or something else?
It could be a jet, or possibly an anti-tail, which is more of an optical effect based on our viewing angle. Still, it was a notable feature. So if you pull together all the things that kind of bend expectations, you've got the super high CO, the strong cyanogen, which points to volatile nitrogen compounds, and then this other detail. The one that really made specialists raise their eyebrows. Some data showed unusually strong neutral nickel lines compared to iron.
Okay, hang on. Nickel. Why is nickel the thing? Iron's the common metal we think of, right? In asteroids, meteorites.
It is.
So why nickel? Is there any way that happens naturally, or are we immediately jumping to, like, alien alloys?
Now, let's hold off on the alien alloys for a second. That's definitely the right question, though. Nickel can absolutely show up naturally in a comet's coma. It often comes from tiny dust particles, bits of meteoritic material, sublimating, turning straight to gas. But the strength of the nickel signal relative to iron, in this specific context, it's noteworthy. It suggests the material mix, even if natural, is pretty exotic. But, and this is crucial complexity, even exotic complexity, and these structural quirks, they don't automatically mean artificial.
Right. And that brings us back to probably the single most critical scientific data point. Its movement. You said earlier, no verified controlled maneuvers. Nothing's been confirmed showing it speeding up or slowing down in a way that can't be explained by gravity or just gas sputtering off it right.
Correct. All the data we have is consistent with, well, basically a big chunk of dirty ice getting a slight push from its own evaporating gases, just like any other comet. But this is exactly the opening the shielded intent idea uses. The argument is that a truly advanced, stealthy probe wouldn't fight physics. It would be designed to use physics to exploit it as camouflage.
Okay, so we've got the facts on the table. Lots of sea arrow, that weird nickel signature, complex structure. None are smoking guns for artificial, but together they paint a picture of something unusual. Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's step into that what if. The idea of shielded intent. We're not picturing, a spaceship with blinking lights. The hypothesis is more subtle. Imagine durable systems, maybe sensors, data storage, perhaps some kind of long-dormant relay protected inside a thick sacrificial shell, an ablative shield made of the very stuff comets are made of, frozen gases and dust.
And the core concept driving this is something we could call gravitational steering. The idea is the object's path wasn't adjusted recently. It was aimed, maybe millennia ago, with incredible precision. It needs no engines now. It just follows the path. Gravity dictates. Physics itself becomes the perfect cloak. As it flies into our solar system and warms up, that outer shell starts to ablate gases jet off, dust flies away.
Just like a comet.
Exactly like a comet. It mimics it perfectly because it is partly made of the same stuff.
Okay, so for this camouflage to work, you need two things. That pinpoint aiming from ages ago, and a way for the important stuff inside to survive the trip, especially heating up near the sun. What's the physics term the sources use for that survival part?
You can think about the physics using a concept like transition dynamics through medium density gradients. It sounds complicated, but the idea is simple. The object moves from the interstellar medium, which is incredibly empty, call its density, into our solar system, which is, relatively speaking, much denser with solar wind, radiation, dust density to our Saturnans. As it makes that transition, it absorbs a huge amount of energy. It has to dump that energy somehow.
And the ice shell does the dumping, boils off.
Precisely. The energy lost to that surface ablation, the ice turning to gas, the dust carrying heat away acts like a giant, natural, self-regulating heat shield. It protects whatever might be inside. So a really clever design could use this entirely natural process. It hides in plain sight, letting gravity do all the steering, no thrusters needed. It's elegant in a way. No maneuvers, no signals, no violations of physics, only mass, velocity, and a path.
But wait, doesn't that one core fact, no confirmed non-gravitational nudges, doesn't that just torpedo the whole cloaked intent idea? I mean, if it is a machine aiming at something as small and fast-moving as Earth, or even the inner solar system, from light years away, thousands of years in advance, surely it would need some tiny course corrections. Wouldn't that be incredibly hard to get perfectly right?
That is the absolute core tension. You're right. The hypothesis counters that the design itself prioritizes ultimate patience and zero detection. If the initial aim, calculated maybe tens of thousands of years ago, was done with, say, near-atomic precision, then the need for a visible course correction later is designed out. The goal is silence. Any failure of internal systems wouldn't lead to signals. It would just make it look even more like a slightly weird, complex comet fragmenting unpredictably.
That kind of stability, or maybe composure, is actually something noted by one of the fictional observers in the source material we looked at. Someone called Xyloth, writing from Mars, watching 3I ATLAs go by. Xyloth didn't focus on the chemistry as much as just how it moved, how steady it seemed. Most natural comets, apparently they kind of stumble or wobble a bit as they heat up unevenly and bits break off. They flare up, dim down erratically.
That's common. Thermal stress.
But Xyloth described 3I ATLAs as gliding, moving with an intent-like stability.
That's a powerful observation, even if subjective. If the design was using that ice shell as a carefully managed heat sink, you might expect more structural integrity than just a random clump of ice and rock held together loosely. Xyloth's conclusion really sums up the whole speculative hypothesis perfectly. The most advanced arrival would look exactly like this: harmless, silent, statistically unremarkable until you look too closely.
Okay, but before we get completely swept away by Xyloth's rather poetic take from Mars, let's hit the brakes. Scientifically speaking, Occam's razor, right? The simplest explanation is usually the best, and we still have a perfectly good natural explanation that fits everything we've seen.
Absolutely. We have to keep coming back to that. The leading scientific consensus is still, quite reasonably, that 3I ATLAS is a rare but natural object, a chunk of volatile-rich material flung out of some distant star system. The high Sierras, the strong CN, even the weird nickel hint, all these things can potentially be explained by natural processes under extreme conditions. Maybe it formed in a super cold place. Maybe it went through some unique processing as it journeyed here and then hit our sun's warmth. The core principle here has to be, unusual does not mean artificial, and complexity does not imply intention. Even if it's 100% natural, it's still an incredibly valuable find. It's like getting a piece of alien geology delivered to our doorstep.
That distinction is key, defining that boundary. So, okay, For you listening right now, wanting to know what would push this beyond just an elegant hypothesis, what concrete evidence would scientists need? What would actually make them say, okay, this isn't natural? What are the specific criteria? We need to see specific things, and again, none of these have been confirmed for 3I ATLAs. First, you'd need non-gravitational accelerations, changes in speed or direction that clearly do not track without gassing. If it suddenly changes course, even slightly, and there's no corresponding puff of gas or dust visible to explain the push, that suggests an engine.
Yep, that's number one. Number two, look for things that defy natural randomness, like geometric symmetries in its shape or structure that just don't happen through chaotic accretion, or maybe modulated light curves. If its brightness varied in a clear repeating pattern, that could suggest controlled rotation or even potentially a signal.
Like sending code.
Potentially.
Right.
Or just indicating non-random structure.
Okay. And finally,
you look for physical signs that are completely separate from natural comet behavior. Things like stable narrowband emissions, a focused beam of light, or radio waves that isn't just heat radiation. Or changes in its spin state, how fast it's rotating that decouple from the expected torques from outgassing. If it suddenly spins up or slows down, and there's no visible jet causing it, that implies an internal mechanism.
An engine adjusting its orientation or something.
Exactly. Now, this unexplained acceleration, unnatural geometry or patterns, non-thermal signals, decoupled spin changes, that's basically the scientific gold standard for saying this isn't just a rock amp. If Oumuamua had shown clearly modulated brightness changes, or if ATLAS here suddenly emitted a steady, narrow radio frequency, well, the conversation would shift instantly. We'd stop talking about comet chemistry and start asking about communication protocols. That clear boundary, it's still holding for 3I ATLAS. The data doesn't force us across it. Yet.
so if we try to connect this all to the bigger picture, the real fascination with 3I, ATLAS perhaps, is how it forces us to think about what advanced engineering might actually look like. Maybe the most sophisticated tech isn't loud and flashy, but silent, patient.
That's the tension, isn't it? It could just be a really interesting ancient piece of ice from another star.
Yeah.
Or it could be something else, deliberately wrapped in ancient ice. The idea of an ablatively shielded, gravitationally steered object, it is consistent with the physics we know. It can fit the observations we have, and it's big, but it's not required by the observations. The natural explanation still works.
Which brings us back to Xylos' final thought, maybe reframed a bit by our deep dive today. If 3I ATLAS is natural, it's arguably the most elegant, chemically informative comet we've ever encountered. A treasure trove of information about another solar system. But if it is engineered, then it might just be, as Xylos put it, the most patient machine in history. So what does this all mean for you? Well, the mere fact that a silent, non-propulsive, perfectly camouflaged object using natural physics is plausible, that maybe changes how we should even think about searching for intelligence elsewhere. It leaves us with a pretty deep question to chew on. If a truly advanced civilization did want to observe us, quietly, without making a grand entrance, and they built the perfect disguise using the laws of physics itself, how would we even prove it? What kind of evidence would force us to redefine not just Comet, but maybe even our definition of intelligence out there in the cosmos? Something to think about until our next deep dive.